for being here today. Yesterday, the President opened a new school, St. George's, and today he'd also be opening another new school, Christ Church. And so I'm extremely pleased that he will be speaking of our policies in the education sector. And in this season, the political season, it's necessary to do so given the many distortions surrounding policy which takes place. So even for someone as involved as we've been at the policy-making level, sometimes it's quite revealing as you now approach election season, where you have to account for your performance in the past several years about the progress in the various sectors. So I was going through the documents that we're preparing to make public shortly, and in the education sector, it's unbelievable the level of achievement that we've had in really 3.5 years after COVID. We've been able to commence and complete the rehabilitation of over 100 schools. We have trained or paid for the training for 82,000 Guyanese, 39,000 of those from the Gold Scholarship Program. We've completed our promise of free university education, but not just university, but tertiary education. We're now writing off $19 billion of student loan. We've commenced that, which was not a promise we made in 2020, but we decided it would be unfair to have people make these payments when we've announced a policy of free education. So effectively, for those who have not paid over the years, the free university education policy is retroactive because they don't have to pay for those loans. We've announced payment for 8 subjects, CXE and CSEC, and much, much more. We've trained over 5,000 teachers at CPC in these years, and considering that many of these teachers have also accessed the Gold Scholarship Program, it's a large number of teachers who have benefited from greater training at the tertiary level. This means that their income would also be increased. We've hired 3,000 teachers more since we took office, adding to the complement of 12,000, so we have 15,000 teachers now. And that has allowed us, as I spoke of last week, to have around 12 students per teacher in the classroom, which is a great metric by any standard. And so these are just some of the achievements we've had. We started rolling out the digital school. We have improved many classrooms. We have smart classrooms. We started working on that. We've improved access in the hinterland by putting in high-speed Wi-Fi in many of those schools. So it's been 3.5 years of major achievements in the sector. And the commitment has been there, given the increase in resources to the sector, from 53 billion to 185 billion allocated for education. So when I see now the opposition trying to distort what we've been doing, I I hope that people will pay attention to the facts, because often in Guyana, people do not pay much attention, or maybe those politically aligned don't pay enough attention to facts. And that's why they make the same promises of things that have already been done, and they often claim or take credit for things that they never had any part of conceptualizing. So last week after my press conference, and I spoke of the additional stuff that we wanted to do in education, I pointed out that the philosophy behind all of these investments was to take away the burden of funding education from the family. And so if we have made improvements we're paying for tuition now, and we're on all training, we have better classrooms, etc. We returned the Because We Care grant. We now want to assist families with transportation. It's not a new idea. We've been speaking about this for the past 2 years. I've been speaking about this when I was critical of President Granger's policy of taking away the grant from the kids, the cash grant, $1.6 billion per year, and replacing it with 30 buses that he got donated, old buses from the private sector. And I pointed out, if you take $1.6 billion per year and multiply by the 5 years he had been in office, they took away from the children $8 billion. That's what you get. With $8 billion, you could have bought 1,000 buses. So they talk a lot about assisting with transportation, but in a net sense, families and children were worse off because they lost the $8 billion over the 5 years in the Because We Care grant. We promised to restore the grant and increase it. So in 1 year now, the grant at $55,000, well, that includes the uniform allowance. It's $11 billion the children get. So in a 5 years period, it's $55 billion we're transferring to the families through the Because We Care grant. That will happen in the future. But that's not all. We said, in addition to the Because the Care grant, we want to introduce now, consistent with what we have said before, years back, that we now want to assist with transportation. And that's why we are going to introduce a transportation grant on top of the Because We Care grant, which in itself will increase, so that we can help families or assist them in funding transportation. They said, oh, we said that 2 weeks ago. They're clueless, because we've been talking about this for the past 2 years now, and we've been talking about the philosophy behind it, which is assisting families. And that's why we said we want to expand the hot meal and the school feeding program. So if we can assist with transportation and tuition and paying for the exams, and now with the hot meal program in school, you at every level, effectively you're taking away the burden of funding education from the family. And so every child, regardless of the family's level of income, they're poor or not, they'll be given equal opportunities. And consistent with what I spoke of last week too, about the move to have universal secondary education, that every child who even didn't get 50% of the mark at CSEC, not CSEC, the grade 6 exam recently, that those kids, by the time they're ready to write exams, they would all write the CXC paid for by the government, because we'd have a secondary program. Even if they go to the tops of primary, they will have a secondary program taught to them there. Unlike the period in the past when we started, when we took government, where 65% of the kids had to fail and could not write the CXC because they had to go to community high schools or the tops of primary that never offered the CXC. So only 35% of the children who took the common entrance at that time could have gone on to write CXC. And you know, with CXC, you can either get a job or go on to tertiary learning. So we were one exam at the tender age of 10, 11. That examination was the determinant of the future of that child. Now we have moved away from that. So I was surprised to see they said, oh, we're stealing the idea of the transport grant from them. But this comes from people who don't read, who don't follow anything. So when they say something, they fall in love with what they say. They think it's original thought. And that's why we've seen, like some young woman, Nakisha Sinclair, saying she had to write the thing for Nigel Hughes, his manifesto that they're speaking of. And APNU has been putting our programs into AI with a command to rewrite them so that it looks original. But many of them genuinely believe it's fresh ideas, that it's new original thought. You know, this is great intellectual power. Look at what we're putting out here. It's just old, worn stuff that we've spoken about for a long time in the past. And this is the poverty in policy making in the opposition. They have no plan for and they never had plans in the past, and they had no plan for the future. They have very little accomplishment. So this brings me to, having said all of that, that they should read a bit more. So I think it was a few days ago that the president opened the Ogle bypass. And this has generated some controversy. Patterson said, oh, we've downgraded the project because Edgehill said that the project would have cost under APNU twice as much. So I then saw several stories, including the one from News Source. It says here, Chairman of the AFC and former Minister of Public Infrastructure, David Patterson, said to suggest that the recently commissioned 133.8 Ogle to Eccles Highway is the same project that was conceptualized by APNU AFC government with an estimated cost of $275 million. So clearly, we built it for half of what they had conceptualized it at. So consistent with what I said earlier, that they take credit for everything, there have been a whole slew of public comments about how is it that the PPP has been saying that we had no plans. We conceptualized this project. We had a plan to do it, and it seems fair on the face of it. Their speaker, News Source, has been pushing this. Their supporters have been repeating it. We conceptualized. They take credit for conceptualizing the project. Now, Edgehill should have been a little bit more diligent to point out I have here with me, so this morning I asked the people coming to the press conference, I said, can you print out this study that we had? No. So here I have a study that was done in September of 2003, and I'm going to share with you this document. There was 4 years into my presidency. They're looking at an alternative southern approach to Georgetown. This is a study. You will see the alignment here mapped out that we studied in 2003. That was like what, 22 years ago? And it has here, this is Ogle, you see the bypass here, coming here, and the Mandela bit coming all the way to the airport. From Mandela, this is the Mandela to Eccles, connecting back. This was there. I'll share the cover with you. 2003. We studied it. We had costs, etc. Why couldn't we implement it? Because, and that's, again, it takes me into a long or bit of history, the economic history of the country, which I've been asking people to study. In the early, our starting point, according to Carl Greenidge, was the debt, the outstanding debt was 9 times the size of our economy. We were scheduled to pay 153% of revenue to service that debt. When we got write-off, the actual was 94% of revenue we were paying to service the debt that APNU left, the PNC at that time left. The first 10, 15 years of being in government, we struggled to take a bankrupt country, because you're bankrupt by any standards if all of the taxes you collect has to go to paying debts. You're bankrupt as a country. You're insolvent. The IMF declared us as uncreditworthy. We couldn't borrow in the APNU period because the debt overhang was so huge. By the time 2015 came, without oil, the debt had shrunk to 45% of GDP. One of the lowest figures even among developed countries in the world without oil. And we were using 10% of revenue, down from 153% or 94% actual of revenue to service that debt. But it took us some time to get there. We had lost opportunities, money that could have been invested in projects of this nature. Although we had the great ideas, we planned for them, we couldn't accomplish because we were busy returning a bankrupt country to solvency. And sometimes the biggest achievement of the PPP, I would think, it's not the many roads that we built and the hospitals and schools, including in that period when we were practically bankrupt. It was taking a bankrupt country and returning it to solvency. That was one of the biggest achievements that people don't even talk about today. But people would ask, well, if you had the plan since then, why couldn't you build it? It was just that we had to do the essentials, because remember, this was a new project. But in the same period, it took you 3 hours from Georgetown to get to the airport, because the potholes used to be like 4 feet deep in front of the central bank, between the Ministry of Finance and the central bank. On Main Street, there was a pothole in front of the Palm Court there that vehicles used to get stuck in that pothole. That was the state of Georgetown. That was a Main Street. Blackout 2 weeks at a time. You think about GPL being giving us a spate of blackouts recently on the East Coast. there because they're moving some of the transmission main. But we used to be 2 weeks without power at that time, nothing in the hospital, and having to deal with the debt. That's our history. That's the economic history of the country. So we have the plan, this plan here. So for them to say they conceptualize in 2019 this project, and all of their supporters saying, oh, it's great, yes, look at our big, great intellectual work that we did. It's nonsense. And they take credit because I don't think Patterson even knows about this, because he talks off the top of his head. And if there's nothing, you know, sticky finger Patterson, if there's nothing in it for him personally, as we've shown in the charges, he doesn't touch a project. So should be ashamed that we could complete this project, half of what they had anticipated building it for, but the details of it, if you go down and you look here, even Busby Dam that we're completing now, so that once it's completed we can divert the traffic there and then fix the Grove bit. Busby Dam, all of it, you see in the green. These are the alignments, the roads coming out. The whole project conceptualized since then. But since we're at this about talking about development planning, we're the only party that has put this out, several of our plans in various documents. So you can find in the National Development Strategy, nearly 2,000 pages, about 7 volumes of work. Then you can find a lot of the ideas there. The poverty reduction strategy, the competitiveness strategy, low carbon development strategy. 3 seminal documents that trace the evolution of policy making in Guyana, addressing various challenges at various points in our history, because the challenges change. As you accomplish one thing, you have to address another challenge. So we have outlined these in documents. You ask APNU and AFC what document you can point to that would say or ground their vision in. Nothing, absolutely nothing. In fact, Nigel Hughes recently was saying, let's all get together and craft a plan for the future of the country. And I asked here, this party has been around for maybe 17, 18 years, the AFC. And now you don't even have a plan. Now you were in government and you still don't have a plan. At least talk about the elements of what you already have. So I want to just look at from the National Development Strategy. I just today want to look at one sector, since we just talked about the road and the planning for the road from 2003, as you've seen, the bypass road, the Ogle bypass, which has just been completed, and the Heroes Highway, which will get to the airport shortly, from 2003. I had mapped the route. But that idea was even before that. The idea of doing this came. So in 1996, I handed over to Chedi Jagan several volumes of the National Development Strategy. I was Minister of Finance, and I was tasked by Chedi Jagan to work and produce that document, along with members of the government and civil society. We included civil society. The idea of this road was since then, and there are several other ideas. Just thereafter, we were trying to get the entire parliament to discuss the National Development Strategy and adopt it. We went to a conference in Atlanta with Desmond Hoyt, Dr. Jagger and myself, Desmond Hoyt, to talk about how we can work together to collaborate around national issues. We tried to present this document in the parliament to have a discussion. APNU, PNC at that time, refused to engage. So we took a different approach. We said, let's call it a civil society document. Take the original document and invite people from civil society to be part of refashioning the document. So maybe if it doesn't say PPP civic, they will accept it. So I invited Dr. Kenneth King, who was the General Secretary of the PNC. He was one of the persons who was instrumental in working on this. He subsequently became the ambassador to Brussels, Guyana's ambassador to Brussels when I was president. And he and several others from civil society work with us to refashion the document with the hope that if we gave it a different name, the PNC would engage. They never did engage. But I want to show you, since 1996, and then in the refashioned document, which was completed in about May 1999, I became president in August of 1999, May 1999. It was completed when I was Minister of Finance, and then it was published in November of 2000, so after I became president. And in this document here, it speaks about exploring the rail link once again. So I see people say, oh, we talk about rail. We've been talking about rail and a light rail and a tram system for ages, decades. I want to read some, just little bits. A new highway between Georgetown and Soesdijk will be constructed. This was from 1999. So even before we did this study in 2003, the idea was there to do it. A two-lane bridge across the Demerara River adjacent to the Demerara Harbor Bridge with a vertical clearance over the navigational channel, which would enable ocean-going vessels to pass under the bridge. This new bridge will be connected to the East Bank Demerara Highway and the West Bank Demerara Road. It will replace the Demerara Harbor Bridge. This was 1999. 2 lanes high-span bridge. Now we're doing 4-lane bridge. A 2-lane bridge will be constructed across the Berbice River with a vertical clearance to allow navigational thing. When we actually did it, we didn't have the money, so we had to engage the private sector to build that existing bridge. And the high-level bridge was very costly, so we opted for, we had a study done of 6 sites in the Berbice River. We paid $1.1 million for that study and identified 6 locations, past Everton, New Amsterdam, all the way to where the bridge is at Rosignol. That was the most feasible site at that time. And the bridge was constructed. And with the idea that once we got more money, we'll replace it with a fixed structure. We intend to do that now. A bridge will be built across the Takatu River at Letem. This was 1999. That bridge has been completed. The capacity of roads and bridges between Georgetown and Parika and Timeri and Georgetown Timeri and Georgetown Mahaika will be increased to reduce commuting time. We build the roads out Now we are planning the highways now. Georgetown to Mahaika, Parika to, well, the bridge to Parika, we have already done that part to Crane, etc. I can go down the long list of issues here. And this is only on the transport sector. The development of Ogla Municipal and Regional Airport, that's been done. That was 1999, and it says there we'd privatize it. Chedijagan International Airport, extension of the main runway, resurfacing of the runway, airport expansion, we did it. Construction of a 2-lane road between Molson Creek and Oriala, I spoke of that even last week, that we are now initiating that. The rehabilitation of the Quarantine Highway, we now have awarded a contract for a 4-lane highway from New Amsterdam all the way to Molson Creek. I can go down a long list. If you see a long list of the project, you get the idea. This is only on the transport sector. This document was produced in 1996 and revised in 1999. So a lot that you see now, we had been planning for a long time to get them done. We did not have the resources because of what I just told you earlier. So not that it pains me, I understand that we have an opposition that's bereft of any ideas. But when they go and take credit, they take a lot of credit for these things because they just haven't read stuff. And I will go, there are about 10 other sectors, and I can come back here and deal with every other sector. What we're doing now, how we've situated these in the past planning efforts at the national level. So you're underpinned by a long-term vision. A country can only develop if its policymakers have a long-term vision of the country. And they match that, they accomplish it by matching the resources they have to ensure that you don't damage public finances. So in spite of us funding all of these things now and accomplishing what we've set out to do years ago, our public finances are the strongest they've ever been because the debt to GDP ratio now has fallen to less than 16%. We're using 5% of revenue to service debt. Our revenue has grown considerably, so our public finances are stronger, although we have this massive infrastructure rollout that's transforming our country in every area. And we're doing this in a very deliberate, thoughtful way. This is, you ask Norton about anything to do with it. I saw Wendell Jeffrey doing an interview with Amanza, and she was getting offended when he was asking for specifics. You know, the broad thing, oh yeah, we want to improve healthcare, the usual slogans. Oh, Norton, if you hear Norton, people-centered development. I don't know what that means, especially in the light of the fact that he says he agreed with everything that Granger did, and Granger took away children's grant, Granger took away the free water from the pensioners. That's people-centered development, put taxes on a whole range of things, you know. So he agreed with him totally, but he's all for people-centered development. Slogans. She was hard-pressed, and none of the others can't give details. They either farm out the work or operate through sloganeering. So this is something that is crucial. When people make choices around elections, they make choices surrounding a party that will look at sustainability, not a party that comes and says, I'm going to give you everything, and then if you cost what they're promising alone, it's more money than we have in the treasury. and that we will have for the next 10 years. That's what they're promising. You will not only damage public finances, but they have no intention of implementing the promises. It's because it's just an election gimmick for them. And I can also take you to the other documents. That's only the that's only the NDS. The poverty reduction strategy focused heavily on assisting people. Housing, we determined that keeping water rates constant or lower, electricity, getting people housing and a good quality education, and not having them to pay for health care were the key investments a government needed to make to ensure that people have the opportunity to grow out of poverty. Those were the objectives. And look at the investments by the PPP. Look at even the past few years of even since we got back into office. People talk about cost of living increase, but electricity prices didn't go up in spite of the fact that fuel prices went up significantly globally. Water rates did not go up. Internet rates actually came down. Mortgage rates came down because of large concessions to the bank. And we've invested in education and healthcare, removing the cost of healthcare and education from people so that their disposable income could be used to accumulate wealth and grow. That is consistent. The philosophy is there, and that guided our creation of the poverty reduction strategy. Then the competitiveness strategy was to we started off with no private sector. Under the PNC, the private sector was destroyed in this country. We had to incubate a domestic private sector and create the incentive regime for them, which we did. Focus on the things that matter most to the private sector, and look at what has happened today. The opportunities abound, and we see private sector in a very diverse way. Look at two major opportunities we've had. There are hundreds of them. Look at the large-scale investment in hotels by Guyanese, in agricultural ventures, in services, in construction activities. But on the government side alone, we've refashioned public procurement now, where tens of thousands of Guyanese now are benefiting from public procurement through contracts, unlike under APNU. And now, because of the passage of the local content law, you have thousands of Guyanese, over 1,000 Guyanese companies now doing about 700 million US of business, which they would not have done otherwise, because creating the opportunities. And largely because of, again, a vision that we needed to create wealth at the domestic level, and we need to support the creation of that wealth through small companies. That's why we've said in the next term we're opening up 100,000 acres of land for small farmers and others, more land for the miners. We're going to support manufacturing and processing through the hubs that we create, the innovation hubs, the support hubs, the development bank to make zero interest loan to small and medium scale business so they can grow. It's all consistent with a plan. That's why we have refashioned the whole incentive regime, the taxation regime in that matter. So that's guided again by a philosophy which is enshrined in the competitiveness strategy. And then thirdly, and then fourthly, because that's the fourth one, the low carbon development strategy. A whole new challenge of sustainability, keeping our country safe, getting our assets to earn resources so we can invest in creating green jobs, creating green energy, a green energy mix, and adaptation, which is managing water. I've outlined our plan already. We've earned We're earning 750 million, how that's being invested in keeping our entire coast and even hinterland safe, all of our people safe from flooding by these new canals we're building, new cokers, new pumping capacity, etc. That would prepare us for these changes. I don't want to go into great detail there, but we're guided by frameworks. We're not like gonna just make a promise just like that. It fits into a philosophy, and it recognizes the challenges. And so this is not guesswork that the PPP operates in. And when we make promises, that's why we've been able to deliver them. That's why in 2020, we made some promises. We were very careful about what we promised. The promises were ambitious, but we delivered on them. We delivered on all of the promises, and we far exceeded what we delivered on because we're grounded by that. So any other political party which does this now, look at their promises. It's just like crazy things I've seen. Crazy. It's just like, and it doesn't even have any intellectual decency. It's like, you know, at least you can, even if AI writes it for you, you can write, like, explain it differently. But then just anything the PP does, we'll do better than them. We'll give you more money than them. That's all it's about. Nothing about creation, you know, a reasoned way of approaching a problem that the society has. A reasoned approach to the problem, identifying the problem, defining the problem, creating a solution for the problem, and then focusing on how you will implement it, whether the resources would be there. That's how you have to approach anything in life, including in your home or at the national level. If you don't, you make big blunders. The problem when they make the blunders at the national level, it affects everyone. You're free to make the blunder on your own, but when you do so at the national level. So let me focus on one thing that affects everyone else. For example, taxation. Taxation under APNU, a whole slew of taxes. If you want to get a good indication of the taxation policies of APNU, go to Jordan's budget speeches and go to the back of those speeches, and you will find an annex of fee increases and taxation increases. And you'd be surprised. We say over 200 taxes and fees. One time, what's her name again? I always forget her name. The Minister of Public Works, Annette Ferguson, Ferguson, she was housing, or she was Public Works first, I think, and then housing, right? Or both, I don't even remember, yeah. They're just, because they achieved very little, yeah. So they, you know, when people stick in your head when they achieve things. So she asked the question in Parliament that the PP been saying, 200 taxes and fees. Can you give us a list of it? Because we are lying. And so we started preparing, and it ended up like over 300 when you look at the taxes and fees. It was actually more than the 200 we're talking about. So in every sector, no one was spared. From the guy driving his donkey cart, his fee went up, to the health sector, remember the education sector, the miners, they increased the royalty rate, the taxes on machinery and equipment, land rental charges, everything under the sun you could think about. Every single thing. On hinterland travel, reopen at Marijuana, I think, and Port Kaituma, the GRA, pressuring people, are collecting $94 billion more per year. So we said we're going to reverse those when we get into office. We've reversed the taxes that they put. That cost us about $50 billion, the reversal of all that they were promising, or they implemented. So we kept that promise of reversing the taxes. We removed the VAT on machinery and equipment, on water, on electricity, on data, hinterland travel, a number of other things. Reversal cost $50 billion, we gave that up. The cost of living support alone, on using the old freight rate to levy the duty at customs, also we gave up billions of dollars, because when freight prices went up globally from one container, $3,500 to ship it, to $20,000 to ship the same container, we were using the same $3,500 to levy the tax on. So if it's a 10% tax, it's levied now not on $20,000, because it's cost, insurance, and freight, CIF value, that you levy it on. We use the old freight rate so that it wouldn't push up the costs or the taxes. People wouldn't have to pay more high taxes. Billions given up to address the cost of living issue, because globally the prices went up after COVID. Factories were closed, etc., and shipping costs went up. We then removed the 50% excise tax on gasoline and diesel. Now, on gasoline and diesel, we import over $800 million of those two products. The 50% tax will be about $400 and odd million, giving that up. That's about 90 billion Guyana dollars per year. If we didn't do that, guess what would have happened? That every time you go to the pump to buy a gallon of gasoline, you would have had to pay between $500 to $600 more per gallon of gasoline every time you buy a gallon. But now that's an implicit subsidy that people don't see, just to tackle cost of living, so no increase in that cost. We gave that up too. And then we fulfilled a promise. We said no new taxes in the 5 years. And from 2020 to now, the first budget that we've had to 2025 budget, we haven't increased a single tax. We have not increased a single tax. You check the budget. I confirmed that again with Ashley today. That's a promise. We kept our promise. We promised to reverse what they had put in place. We did it. It cost $50 billion. In addition to that, we also gave up a lot of taxes to abate cost of living. And then we fulfill our promise of no new taxes in the 5 years. And we fulfill it on taxation. But in addition to that, what did we do that gave up more benefits? We could have just said no new taxes and leave everything as they are. We dropped the income tax rate, the personal income tax rate, from 28% to 25%, and from 40% to 35%. Now you remember APNOT carried those rates up. So we dropped the income tax rate for personal tax payment, apart from no new taxes. So all Guyanese would benefit. So more than 100,000 persons will benefit from this. We increased the threshold for not paying taxes from $65,000 to $130,000 per month. So under APNU, if you were earning $66,000 per month, you started paying taxes. Now, under our government, if you earn below 130,000, you don't pay taxes. That has benefited thousands of people more. So we double the threshold, and gave up revenue there. So we have introduced tax credits for several things. Insurance and life premium. If you're paying, you take out insurance, etc., you can deduct it. We have now introduced an allowance for children up to for $10,000 per month that is deductible. Two kids if you have. So that's up to $20,000 a month. You can add to the non-taxable threshold to not pay taxes. We have made up to $50,000 of overtime per month tax-free. So you add that to the $130,000. You can, if you are overtime, you have another $50,000 that you can add there, which takes you up to $180,000 per month, which becomes tax-free. And then we said, if you're working a second job, because we want to encourage people to do that, we have labor shortages. The second job, you also get $50,000 of the income from the second job tax-free. So all of these, much more we have done. Apart from no new taxes and reversing their taxes, we've also introduced tons of benefit. Then what else did we do? We made a promise that we'll remove the corporate tax from education and health. So any investment by the private sector now in health and education, they don't pay any corporate tax. So now a lot of people can invest. Public investment in these sectors are growing rapidly. The people are saying the schools are getting nicer than private schools, and they will get nicer. The hospitals are going to get nicer than private institutions, so they have to upgrade too. And they would have to specialize. But now those people have an incentive to upgrade and to lower costs because they don't have to pay corporate tax, which is a promise we made. We kept that promise too. So even on taxation, yeah, I can go down. I have a long list of items here. For example, construction industry. We removed the VAT on building cement, sheetrock, concrete board, on a lot of construction material coming in. We removed the VAT because if you're selling a residential home in properties, you have to pay VAT. We removed that. That would allow the lowering of costs to people. Cell phones, all those things that had VAT on them, we remove all of these things. So the miners are pleased. We reduced the tributor. We removed the tributors tax that was affecting them badly, that had increased it. We took it down to zero. The royalty rate was on a sliding scale. We reduced it further. So and then we reduced taxes on a whole range of vehicles. We removed taxes on ATV and a whole other things. All of these were done. So if you talk about taxation policy alone, compared to what APNU did, they just came into office, promised reduced taxes, ended up increasing taxes on everything. We promised to reverse their hardship taxes. We did so. We promised no new taxes. We did so. And then in addition to that, we remove all these taxes. I can go down every sector I can do this with. We have a story to tell in every sector. And it's a story of fulfillment of promises and a vision. The vision is that you cannot love the productive sector and then tax machinery and equipment that they use in the sector. You can't want manufacturing and then put a VAT on the factory that the people import to create jobs and to expand manufacturing. That I don't know what philosophy was driving APNU. What philosophy drove them to put taxes on basic food items? that were not there before, if they were so concerned about poverty. So that's on taxation. All of this is just to talk a bit about the differences between the contesting parties. So which party now, last week I dealt with the experience, that none of the candidates vying on the other side has the experience of a Neil Frenali or a Mark Phillips. None of them. And it will take them a very, very long time, given their mindset, to get the experience of these two gentlemen. And so I just wanted, maybe I should deal a bit with that first. So what this week struck, something struck me a lot, and maybe I deal with this one first. As we get closer to the elections, too, the rumor mills are going to start spinning a bit faster. And what is still shocking to me is that how an unsubstantiated rumor coming from a suspect source can get even right-thinking people to give it serious consideration. So, you know that APNU is in crisis now. AFC is in crisis too. The opposition is in crisis. They have sought to come together, not around policy, but around sharing positions that they haven't even won as yet. It's a big disrespect to the electorate. They're sharing seats that they have not won as yet. You know, you get 65, I get 35, 25, etc. They've even gone beyond sharing seats in the parliament to cabinet positions, state boards, how many state boards they will get, etc. Which party persons would be running state boards, etc. I've heard 2 persons gave donations to the PNC, and they said they want to, if they get in, they want to run Lands and Survey Board. So that's what they were negotiating around. You know, the ill-fated negotiations. But clearly they understand, because they're not stupid people. They understand what is staring them in the face, which is a defeat. And they're panicked about it. They're terrified. They're fearful. In fact, the fear has led to panic disorder in their camp. I think you had a psychotic break. They're suffering from psychosis now. So psychosis is really when you can't differentiate from what is real and what is fiction. So they have and all of this is playing out every day. And it comes out in various forms. The belligerence, the bravado, the magnitude and the frequency of the lies that they tell. So, what is happening in their camp, they're trying to project onto the PPP. So Sherrod Duncan and the others have been doing this. Sherrod Duncan and the others are fearful, like he is extremely fearful person. He jumped from one party that he thought was useless into another useless camp. And by now, I think he is recognized that none of them have a chance of winning the elections. So he is really in full panic mode. The psychosis is visible in his behavior. So he comes up with this fiction, that there's a break in the PPP camp. And that we are panicked that Jagdeo wanted the elections to be on the 1st of September. But they're going to lose the elections, if it's held on the 1st of September. And that our poll show this. Now, if we have a poll, you think Sherrod Duncan would ever see the results of our poll? He can't even get app news. Anyhow, he likes to talk about poll. Yeah, right. So Sherrod Duncan has been spreading all of these rumors. So he said, we're replacing Mark Phillips now with Edge Hill. And I saw Big Smith News carrying that. A number of our supporters, and you guys are going to be really stupid too. I can talk that way to our supporters, carrying this stupidity. Because you know that anything they say is a lie. Credible source is the least credible source in the country. It's Sherrod Duncan and his madness. And we have a time-tested. Mark Phillips has been a great prime minister for this country. Mark Phillips has decency, credibility, headed the army, commanded people. He walks around this country with pride, and we are proud of him. We're proud of him. Mark Phillips, combined all of the other candidates on the other side, don't have the decency and the skill of Mark Phillips. All of them. And we're very proud, and he shall be our prime ministerial candidate. In our camp, we don't make decisions one day and change it the other day. That's what Sherrod is worried about, that he and Jureta get thrown out back because Nigel and the other man talking again, Norton. Because both of them are panicked because they see, what's staring them in the face. So he is very insecure. So to spread a rumor like that and then have sensible people also write about it and raise it as a concern just shows the influence of stupidity on people's mind. And how would you even think that this could be true knowing the PPP? You see the momentum we have. Look at our fundraisers. Look at the people showing up. We have a track record. We're the only party that is ethnically diverse, that carries a national message. And you would believe a Sherrod Duncan that we're worried? They can't even pull together. I see Norton as a couple of people, like a couple of kids running around the Starbucks market saying Norton for president, as though they have to convince themselves that he and everybody ignoring them and saying, oh, they're a nuisance, right? You're a nuisance. Leave here. There was a very different time that all of the people would probably join them. Nuisance. He goes around the country, people refusing to even shake his hand. And he, not because they think he has blood on his hand, like he said, he can't shake our hands, right? Because that's it. But because they think he has no hope of winning the elections too. So what, if any party had momentum, it's the People's Progressive Party. And it's not because we're special, it's because we've kept faith with people, because we've done what we said we'll do. And people recognize that their lives are changing for the better. And with our plans, everyone will be able to achieve their dreams. They will get support to do that. And that we're working for all of Guyana, regardless of your race or religion or gender. That's what they recognize about us. That's what's so special about us. On the other hand, they're all about race. So, like Deron Adams kind of repeat this. You see the whole thing, because he's panicking Linden itself. I know how the momentum we have in that area, the high spirit among our activists in the area. They have high spirit. They're working every day on the ground, unsolicited. They're going around talking to people. I can put together 1,000 volunteers to look at the activity at the convention center. We had like 800 to 1,000 volunteers just to be ushers and to get back the chairs and to get people fed, because it's thousands of people who came to a dinner. We didn't buy a professional service to do that. We pulled that off from the party. Volunteers of every race, you saw it there, working now because they're happy. We have a positive campaign, and because they're proud that we've kept our promise to the people of the country. Which other party can do that? The anemic gathering they have. They had a fish fry in Canada. I got a graduate of finance, and there's the other man, Mai Paul. And I heard people don't want to give Mai Paul the donation. They want to give it to the party. They don't want to give Norton too. So they have a big trouble, because they're worried. You know, Mai Paul has a history on that about campaign, money. But the thing is that they said they had a bigger crowd than before. It was supposed to be 2. It went to 7 persons. Look at the picture of the activity in Toronto. You look at it. If you haven't looked at it, look at what they post. They might pull them down before. They talk about momentum. About 10 people just Mai Paul dancing and stupid. Nobody pays attention to them anymore. So what momentum they have, and who are we losing to? So that is why they will resort to these rumors, and you should expect them as we get closer to election. You remember on the election day in local government election, they were spreading rumors about the boulevard, how we were selling out people land, telling the vendors in Georgetown we'll throw them off the street if we won the elections. Rumor mill. And these racist, having said that, let me say, I need to give a shout out to my friend Burke too. I haven't spoken about him a long time. So last week I said, you know, the criminal charges are, well, he's guilty of criminal conduct. He's extorting businessmen. So normally he gets all hot under the collar and runs on the social media immediately the same day to respond to me, a long 2-hour response. So somebody said to me, he took from Thursday, he went on Saturday to respond to me. So I said, something is wrong with him. He must be sick or losing his stripe. But then I heard he didn't pay for his Wi-Fi bill, and he lost his internet. So then on Saturday, he went outside of a place in Brooklyn and connected a free Wi-Fi to respond to me, So take care, Burke, pay your bill over there. You can respond to me faster. So coming back to the main issue, all of them will go into overdrive as we get closer to elections. The rumors they would spread like this one, the stupid thing that we were replacing Mark Phillips now as the prime ministerial candidate because we're worried about losing the elections. Mark is an asset to this party. Mark brings great credibility to our list and to our ticket. He combined with President Ali, they have experience and the skill to lead this country compared to anyone else. So I just want people not to be misled by these rumors, particularly a couple of people who contacted me from the party. By now you should know that these are app news sites that will say anything. Let them give the people who believe them the Kool-Aid, because they've done that to their supporters all the time. Lie to them over and over and over. Sandy pointed out how they lied to their supporters, the vice chairman from Region 4, about winning the elections. They continue to carry that lie. They will lie to their own supporters every single day. And please don't get sucked into that sort of politics. So I saw Norton saying Granger will never endorse PPP. Jagdeo going mad. Now, I want to read you what triggered Norton. Now, Norton, I was joking. I know Granger will not support us. But really, what I was pointing out as the standard capture, Jagdeo in his capacity as General Secretary of People's Progressive Party said, by Granger's own logic, citizens should vote for the current regime. Given the extent to which the PNC fooled, used, and abandoned youths, Jagdeo said a former leader would have been better off pledging allegiance to the PPP. Jagdeo reasoned, to tell youths to choose substance but still vote for the PNC is utterly contradictory. That's what the point I was making. Granger said to young people, support the PNC. And then in the same breath he said, choose substance over rhetoric. So it's contradictory. How can you tell young people to choose substance over rhetoric and then tell them in the same breath to support the PNC? And if you want to talk about how the PNC has treated young people, listen to people who campaign hard for them. The same vice chairman from Region 4 campaigned hard for them, was in the leadership, he got excluded. Listen to James Bond, was one of the most avid campaigners among young people for the PNC in the period before they got into office. You listen to his experience, exclusion. Listen to Tandai McAllister. Don't have to listen to the PPP. These are people who work diligently for their victory in 2015, who told young people on their behalf that they will be given opportunities, they would play an important role in the government. All of that was false. They were lying to young people. I remember Dalrymple. This was a strong PNC family their whole life. And we were talking, because in opposition, this family, and they said to me, we made promises to a lot of young people that live in the Camberville area. We told them they're going to get jobs, going to get assistance, for all sorts of ventures. And we're ashamed now to go back to those young people. They're sort of like 2 years into the government, because we can't even ourselves, we were working with these people side by side. We can't even get access to them. They're so aloof. They don't take a call, they don't listen to anybody, and all they're about are themselves and their families. Like we have seen, the friends and family who got the land, who got the scholarship. It's the ministers and their families who got the contracts, Cathy used her own company, etc. They didn't care anything about helping those people. So they were the ones who were facing the young people back on the ground, because they were the conduits through which the promises were made. It's the same thing like Charan Das. He was telling the sugar workers in the area where he lived that they would get a 20% increase on the afternoon. They will, they would expand the sugar industry. And then what happened? The factory was shut down in the community where he lived. And the sugar workers now are cussing him every day when he's playing dominoes by their side. He couldn't go back to his communities or his community. So a lot of that is how they treated young people, the betrayal. And even now, the environment that is created in the PNC and AFC for the opportunities for everyone, but especially for young people, the atmosphere is not there. The dictatorial leadership. So I saw Figueira resigning, and all of the other people, young people who resigned, Tandai, James Bond, Sandy, a whole range from the PNC, including the regional chairman, and they all, and so now the latest is Figueira. And Figueira said that no vision, no leadership. He said that he's upset with the racism in the party and also the movement away from age-old principles. When Norton could politicize the sovereignty of Guyana by walking out on a motion that would lend solidarity to our country in the face of Venezuela's aggression, he took foreign policy to a new low. And so the vindictive internal politics within the AFC and the PNC, the visionless racist policies internally, the unilateral decision making within the party is driving people away. And apparently that is the same thing that Jureta Finance and Sherrod Duncan and the others claim that happened within the AFC, and I see they've had other young people leaving them too. But they've gone from one useless party, as I said before, and they've jumped into the other one, from the frying pan into the fire, and they'll discover it. So this is what's happening here. There's no room for people to grow. And when what's her name again? I didn't sleep much. From Berbice, the main activist from Region 5. She's in charge of policy making, their chief scrutineer. Carol Joseph. I heard Carol Joseph is the chief policy maker. Wait until the Jureta Finance and Sherrod Duncan, they have to deal with Carol Joseph. Already, I see they have an internal problem there, that big fissures in the party, that these new people just coming in and they want positions in the party, watch what will happen. Sure, Duncan is talking about cracks in the PPP. They have like not fissures, they have like, what is, I don't know, what's a bigger version of a crack? A precipice? Yes, the precipice opening up like that, a massive one, yeah. So wait until Carol Joseph gets hold of them. Then they would understand about policy making. So I've seen a lot of people walking away from the PNC, and this trend will continue. They're visionless, racist, and that's what their reasoning is being given. So don't go after those people. Don't send your trolls to cuss them out, because everyone knows that's the truth. So this policy of sending the PNC people to cuss all of these people who have moved away for their own good and for the good of the country, who want to make a special contribution to the country. And we welcome a lot of people to the People's Progressive Party. Not, as I said before, because we believe that everyone should have a chance to serve the country. And we believe that people can make a contribution through the party. I just wanted to address quickly the issue of Guyana's electoral system has become susceptible to corrupt voting by foreigners, Alexander. Now, suddenly Alexander is talking about GCOM's capacity to hold free and fair elections. If there is ever a threat to holding free and fair elections to GCOM from anyone, it would be the PNC cabal that is in there. That cabal has, in the 5 months, that cabal has or sought to support the rigging, and that cabal is already seeking to undermine the preparations for the elections. They will not succeed. I'm pleased that the Carter Center is coming also to observe the elections. There'll be several observer groups, and Vincent Alexander and the others, through their worn arguments, will not be able to undermine the preparation for the elections. So he said, corrupt voting by foreigners. I don't know what he means by this. He was talking about some people, Guyanese, who, and very small numbers. It's not like a lot of people. Small numbers who have lived here for 40 years, 30 years of their lives. In some of the Amerindian villages, when a child is born in some of these villages, the child doesn't get registered. Because, if you're born in Georgetown or on the coast, then you have to fill up the form, the hospital helps you, you register the child. They're living all their lives in Guyana. Some of them are even working for the government. They don't have a birth certificate. They don't have any document to show. They're born in our country whole lives, but because their mother or father couldn't register them in a village, say in Baramita or somewhere else, they're our people. He is opposed to them. I'm not talking about people coming from Venezuela now. He's opposed to them getting their birth certificate. And not many of them are on the list. If you look at the growth in the list, it's small numbers. It's just a small number in these communities. But, for example, 37,000 people in Region 4. And in some of the outlying regions, it's 3,000, 5,000 people from 2020 to 2025. But he's opposed to that. They will make every excuse to paint the picture of that the PPP is trying to rig the elections in the future. We have a tough system. You have to run a gauntlet of checks before you get a ballot. We have presiding officers with a folio with your picture on it. We have the polling agents of all the political parties sitting in that polling place. Some countries don't have that. They count the ballots at the place of poll. It's not electronic, it's paper. So, and you can only vote here, even if you're on the list and you're abroad, you can't vote. You have to present yourself in the polling place where you're registered to. So I would say ignore all of the noise coming out from people like Vincent Alexander. They've shown that they would stand on the side of unrighteousness or on the side of people who've been trying to subvert the elections. I just wanted to deal with that. I have a few things more, but I think I'm going on a little too long already. So maybe I'd leave those for another time. So I'm going to start increasing the frequency of my engagement as we get closer to election. It takes too long to respond to these guys now. I need to do a quicker response. So thank you very much.
Dr. Jagdeo Shervin with Kaichur News. Sir, is government still safe enough to pump revenues or US dollar into the sector without oil revenues present, if you understand what I'm trying to say?
Safe?
Yeah.
What do you mean
is it
safe?
Possible? Could we pump the oil revenues that are coming into the system to stabilize the dollar?
Yeah, we have a huge capacity to intervene by selling currency to the bank. As I explained earlier, it's carefully managed, and we don't want leakages. It's getting even worse now with Trinidadian companies. And as things get tougher over there, I saw Prime Minister Rav Gonzalez speaking about some of these issues. And we have a problem with the currency, not the instrument. So the dollars are a bit scarcer because we don't sell too much dollars. We sell to the bank through transfers directly to the bank accounts, etc. So that is an issue, not because of the lack of availability of money, but it's money, for example, the currency. The currency is sometimes scarcer because if you go in to buy, you may not get the currency at the time you want. And some people may buy and hoard for themselves the currency. But we have an enormous capacity to intervene in this regard, but it's carefully calibrated. Enormous capacity.
There's an issue whereby, like you said, people are hoarding for themselves, and it's driving up the daily rate.
Yes, because of the currency itself. So if you can go to the bank, some people don't want, and that's why we are checking if the Chinese are doing this. That some of the Chinese supermarkets, etc., we're checking how they're paying for their goods, because some may be through the purchase of gold, and we're examining that, and some may be through the purchase of currency, because they can't come through the formal banking system. We're watching carefully. So we're watching all of these things. Don't think that you're not watching what's going on there, and you're going to see enforcement action against a lot of those people. You recall, we've done a lot of sting operations in the past, and a lot of those will continue. Like last week, I dealt with the Venezuelan presence here, and whilst we're accommodative, we're watching it carefully too. And I also dealt with the fact that once this ID card comes out within a year, we'll know about every foreigner who is in our country. Because without Without that ID card and the biometrics, if you try to move around the country and the cameras don't recognize you and you're in our database, somebody is going to come and ask you, what are you doing here? You know, so that if you're not citizen or you don't have that ID card, and remember the ID card now will have their biometrics, so it goes up into a central database and the cameras scan people, and we can pick up a lot of people at the borders here too. So that's what we're working on now, and we want to know who's in our country and how they get here and whether they're legally here or not, and whether they are engaged in lawful activities. That is important for us. And then also that will allow us to ensure that our people, our citizens, have benefits that are far exceed those who are here, especially in terms of ease of access. Ease of access, you know, like I spoke already, coming through the airport. If you have a Guyanese ID, a secure ID, we don't care if people go out and come in too much. If they go to the US and you get trouble with your visa, that's a different problem. But when you're coming home, we don't care too much because they are our people. So a lot of that is being looked at.
Good afternoon, Vice President Jagdeo. Mikhail Rodriguez for Daybreak News. No government in the world has had 100% perfect deliverance in different policies. Fortunately for your administration, it seems to be 80% of your policies are advantageous to the citizens of this country. You mentioned something earlier that is worrying. Giving assistance for transportations for school, which will obviously mean you're facilitating a public transportation system that has been responsible for moral decay.
No. If you need to follow what I spoke of this last week. So I don't know, I think you fell asleep at the back there. Right, so what I said, we're not inclined to invest in school buses. That's what we're talking about, except in some communities, like in which we continue doing this. So on the highway, for example, where transportation is very difficult, or in many of like the mines in Linden and some of the other communities, the Amerindian communities where long distances, we will buy a 30-seater, give it to the village or give it to different people. We have done this in the riverine areas too. We'd invest in a school boat and give it to the community, they manage it. We'd help with gasoline sometimes. But we're more inclined to give people a grant to offset some transportation costs, the families. Because the moment you start taking on that, we then have to, if these drivers don't show up, we have a lot of indiscipline now. Then they crash the vehicle, cause problems, etc. Everything comes back to the state sector. And I don't think we have limited capacity to do that in the state sector. It's better not to do something that you then create problems for parents, etc. So a combination. We're not undertaking to do that because I've seen the failures. That's why it failed. All the buses get run down in the distant past. They don't show up on time. Children are waiting by the roadside for hours waiting on the school bus. So, and it doesn't show up, or the man drives off to go and visit his girlfriend with his school bus. We don't want to do that. We want to assist the parents to help with funding of the school kids. So that's what I'm inclined, because as I said before, we live here. We're very organic about this country. And we want to make sure that we do something that benefits some people, not to take on more burden that we can't manage. that take on a burden that we can't manage.
Wouldn't it be more advantageous, Vice President Jagdeo, to revamp the public transportation system itself that would see all Guyanese benefiting from a better
I spoke also,
experience?
so you saw, I mentioned in the LCDS about rail and what we have done. Since when I was president, we examined that part about the rail, light rail, but from Golden Grove to Diamond, and also a tram around, electric tram around the city. So you can move people up and down there from that corridor, which is very populous, and then they jump off, park, and then jump onto a free electric tram, and that comes around the city and drop them off at different points. That is still something that we are examining, whether it could be implemented. So the public transport along that line, but not a public bus transport. And then a lot of people more owning their vehicles. I understand people are saying too much congestion on the road, so maybe public transportation should be used. But in Guyana, you have to examine also whether people are prepared to come onto public transport and park their car at home. So a lot of the feedback we got, a sentiment survey we did, is people said, no, I don't want to go and come off at a bus stop and wait again. They want to drive in their car and come to wherever they're doing business. So we did sentiment surveys already. So we don't want to run too far ahead of the population and what will get major uptake. But clearly, your point is well taken, that public transportation can help to alleviate traffic problems, and especially if it's cheap or free. And eventually, that is why we're thinking about the tram and the rail, but those two to cover these populous areas. The traffic jam on the other communities will, and by the way, the Linden-Susdike Highway, Jalgiro and Adams, is also in the LCDS. He said they conceptualized that, repaving the road. But in the other parts of the country, with the expansion of the road network and given the population, we shouldn't see that amount of traffic jam, except from about Mahaika on the East Coast, well, maybe from Golden Grove, because beyond Golden Grove, the population is smaller. From Golden Grove to the Diamond Corridor, and then on the West Coast, that's where we get more traffic jam.
Jagdeo, over the years, the governments that you have been a part of have been able to boast of your development and how you have been able to develop Guyana. But you've also attracted some of the biggest thorns. Not only attracted, but created some of the biggest thorns. We're talking about the Nagamutus, the Kemraj Ramjatans, now criminals, smugglers, fraudsters like Azadine Mohammed and Mark DeFrance, Dr. Mark DeFrance, who still is a working member of the Georgetown Public Hospital. These are all, things that with the successes have come out of the PPP. How do you work on ensuring that we don't have like this in the future?
So we create opportunities for everyone. If they subsequently turn out to be crooked, we can't be held responsible for that. So let me say Mark France was never a member of the PPP. Might have gotten a scholarship to study medicine like many others a long time back. Thousands of others who got scholarships to study medicine. But if he turned out to be crooked, it's not our fault. But it seems as though you almost have to have or be engaged in some form of crookery now as a qualifying thing for the new political parties that are being formed. When I look down the list of the new parties, and I checked across, all of them have either committed fraud or criminal acts or are hustlers looking for money. A lot of these people, and you look at them independent. I don't want to analyze them here today again, but just look and you will see it's a hustle. Election season for them is a hustle. A lot of them believe that they've seen the success. Like if a one-man party, like what NFA, what's they call him? The man, what's his name again? The people who don't make any significant thing. And under the APNU coalition, who got a seat in the parliament? Not WPA, there was a one, Keith Scott, NFA, yes, Keith Scott. When they don't make no impression on me, right? So I forget that. My brain filters them out. Keith Scott had no constituency. Keith Scott had a single person party, one-man party, like ANOG now has become like a one-man party. Ralph Ramkaran left, Timothy Jonas left. These are people that had some credibility, decency. They seen that this is a criminal move on the part, and I think it's dictated by money. And they're going to collect some money, maybe. And so that is what's happening. So when they see that, oh, there's a possibility if I form some coalition that the people of the country may give us a few thousand votes, and sometimes you don't even need more than 3,000 votes to get a seat, like what happened in the last elections. And I'll get into the parliament. I'll be given a seat in the parliament. So it's a little hustle now. And they think, like some of them have approached the PPP, and they think they're going to come in and get a promise. Nobody gets a promise from the PPP. Not even the current ministers don't know whether they will be in the new cabinet. Nobody has come to us. We don't promise seats or any position before you've gone to the voters. You don't have any respect for people. You haven't even voted as yet, and you're sharing out what they haven't given you. We don't do that. So I think they don't link around us too long if they're coming for the wrong reasons. They go to someone else, the other side, that can make promises to them. They don't linger around us because we have not promised anyone who has come to us any position, guaranteed position. So you have hustlers all the time. And criminal types, yes. So, yeah, you mentioned Mohammed. I didn't want to.
Jagdeo, lastly, the Americans have identified, through their congressmen, identified how much of a threat Azadine Mohammed and the Mohammeds are by their association. At least the Americans must have had intelligence to suggest an association with the Venezuelan, even calling Azadine Mohammed a Maduro puppet. The president, no less than the president of the Cooperative Republic of Guyana, has come out and spoke about this threat. This individual has been sanctioned, is accused of smuggling gold, accused of racketeering, smuggling, and a number of different things. The PPP supporters are reaching out to me and suggesting they're getting mixed signals, because if this individual is a national threat, how every day people get in problems for traffic offenses, or rent, or for the car, people ended up in jail. Baby Skello was in jail for blasphemy, but Azadine Mohammed is allowed to roam free in this country while being called everything but good by the PPP.
I didn't want to waste my time today again with Mohammed. But really, I think by now more people are understanding more about the Mohammeds. And that's the reason why he is hiding from public scrutiny. So everything about him is curated. They take the images, Photoshop them, and then post the images. They take the videos and cut them and post them on their pages. And then anyone else who comments on their page, they delete the comments or block the people, so you only get positives. It's a carefully curated image to mislead. And the media in this country, you're asking me about it. The media in this country, or a significant part of the media, is complicit in this because they believe that somehow he may cause a split in the PPP votes. So the entire opposition media and the commentators have covered up for him and given him a free pass. Now just imagine a person vying to be the president of Guyana and has no press conference so far. I saw Amanza Walton engage with the press and then said, we're not taking questions, but at least she read out a statement, engage in the press. And everyone was harassing her, rightfully so, because she invited people to go there, and she did not want to take questions. And they were critical, Nazima Raghubir and everybody of Amanza. And you know my views on Amanza and the others, so I no love is lost there. So, because she believes Indo-Guyanese are mentally lazy, and she's linked up with two parties who share that sentiment. You know where that's coming from. But at least she held a press conference, and they were critical, acting on like getting on a high horse, the media. And this guy is running a campaign for months now and wouldn't even face the press once. And he gets a free pass. But then they carry all these positive stories about him, downplay every negative and carry positive stories. Would not ever sit at one engagement for 20 minutes. He says, I rant for 2 hours and all of that, the usual apnea line he carries. But wouldn't sit down for 20 minutes and answer questions. So you see now, and you know why. And you know why. Ian Allen, who was invited by him to go and cover his visit, he didn't invite Guyanese media. He invited a Trinidadian media man to go and meet him behind some mountain, well, meaning in a far off place, in one of the riverine areas, hoping he could get another curated appearance and get coverage, because Ian Allen has broad coverage around the Caribbean. Went there, and it started off well, and then the guy asked him some questions. He said, but how are you going to run the country if you're sanctioned? So, no, the first question was, what about the sanctions? And he said, they're removing the sanctions soon, which is a major lie. He has no clue. In fact, long before its removal, they may fetch him. But that's a different story. So he says that. He says, how is that so? I've hired lawyers to get that done. But I can't tell you the name of the lawyers. Imagine if we were to say that. everybody would say, you're crazy. So he lives in a different world. The guy said, what about the gold that you're smuggling? He said, I don't know about that. Listen to that. I don't know about that. So he thinks because he doesn't answer it, the sanction and the gold smuggling goes away. He doesn't know about that. And he was asked about how could you run a country if you were sanctioned. He said, Irfan Ali was sanctioned and Modi was sanctioned. No, but that's not true. Irfan Ali and Modi were never sanctioned. He is an OFAC sanctioned individual. You can't do business with him if you're a United States citizen, and any other citizen of any other country in the world can face law enforcement action and sanctions if they do business with him. That's in the OFAC release. Irfan Ali and Modi were never sanctioned. Even if you don't get a visa, that's a different form of sanction. That's not OFAC. OFAC sanction is Treasury. It's one of the highest. It's selected from only a few people around the world. This is one of the highest levels of sanction when you're sanctioned by the United States Treasury Department. The thing is that immediately, once you get sanctioned here, you can bring, if the country continues to engage with you, you get sanctioned. That's why we've had to shut down all of the engagements with him. They lost their the cabotage and everything else, the vessels that they were moving, I think stone with, and then the cambio license was taken away. Imagine if we didn't take away the cambio license, and they could continue buying US currency and trading that. You know what will happen? The country will be sanctioned. That means you, critic, can't use your credit card. You can't make a purchase online because we don't lose correspondent relations with the US banks. We can't settle any payment with US entities, with Visa or MasterCard or whatever else. You're done. You shut down the country and our payment system. That is what was at stake. But no, they're offended. The PPP should have protected them. Look at the big bad PPP. After we get sanctioned, look how they treated us badly. They took away our cambio license. They took away our gold mining leases and permission to transport the stone. So they wanted us to continue operating with them as per normal, as though they were not sanctioned. So it wasn't, the fallacy of it all is that the PPP is opposed to them and took away all of these things because he is running and poses a threat to the PPP. Long before he even announced he had the intention to run, we had to take away these things from him. But we're not going to, because of perceived closeness, he perceived he was close to us, that we're going to put this country at risk. So it has nothing to do with victimization, because they're trying to paint this picture that they're being victimized by PPP because he's running for president. None of that. He went quietly to the interior saying to the Amerindian communities, the PPP sanctioned him. It wasn't the PPP that sanctioned him. It was the US government, because if he says US government, then the Amerindian community or a couple of people in these areas would say, really? But the PPP sanctioned me because I'm running for president. We didn't sanction him. So let me go back to the Reuters story. The Reuters article was in 2003. No, not 2003. Yes, it was 1 year before. They were sanctioned in 2024. June of 2024, the Reuters article was April of 2003, I think. Huh? And now 2023. What am I saying, 2023? Yes, it's the lack of sleep is getting to me. So the 2023, a whole over 1 year before they were sanctioned, 1 year before, listen to what Reuters said. Reuters said, we have verified information that several departments within the United States of America are investigating the Mohammeds for drug smuggling from Colombia, money laundering for Russian mafias, and 3, gold smuggling. They further said, we are aware that Treasury is contemplating sanctioning them. So anybody could write, but this is a major agency, international agency, in the largest news service in the world. They don't publish a story without getting their sources. They said, our sources are that the Treasury is contemplating sanction. So a year later, the Treasury actually did sanction them. So the information was valid. And they only sanctioned so far because of the gold smuggling. Doesn't mean that the other aspects of that Reuters story has disappeared. The drug smuggling part and the laundering of money for Russian mafia. So we have to see how that plays out, because the investigation started a long time back. They said they were looking at them even under the APNU period. They were looking at them since under APNU period, the US government was. So this is going to play out. We didn't accuse him of that. It's a Reuters did, and Reuters showed enormous credibility when they said he's going to be sanctioned. We think he's going to be sanctioned, and then the Treasury a year later sanctioned him. So that is a very important metric to look at. This is just the beginning of their problem. The vehicle is another matter. And the vehicle just shows how he's a pathological liar. That we said this about this guy. This guy would go the straight face and say, I bought a vehicle, Lamborghini, for $75,000. Nobody in their wildest imagination would believe that. And sticks with the lie in the face of the US government sending us the invoice for what he paid for. The US knows the company, they talk to them. And that's going to play out in court eventually. This is the man who said that he inadvertently mentioned Jaguar when it was a Leopard. Now, you got to be really stupid to see a Leopard and think it's a Jaguar. But he gets away with the lie. But as I said before, it doesn't matter. Jaguar, Leopard, or a big cat. It doesn't care. We don't care too much in the PP. That's a matter for GCOM. But just to show you how he lies. He said the PPP sanction. He's telling the people there. 2, that was always a Leopard, not a Jaguar. Although he said it openly, posted it. Okay. Doesn't this tell you something about him? He lied on the Lamborghini. He lies about the 10,000 kilogram. He said, oh, that's a lot of gold. You have to, it's very heavy. How would you walk through the airport with it? The people didn't say you walked through the airport. They said you smuggled the gold. That's the explanation. And it goes, the media here throwing back. All the time they throw back. Yeah, he gets no question. And incoherent. Every time the guy asks him a question, I look at little snippets of the Allen thing, he's whispering. And then when he couldn't handle the question, he called the people called his people to run off the reporter, to harass the people. And Primus came up and said, how could you ask him this question? You know, the Primus showed up there bullying the man. Yeah, that's right. He has handled as bully. You can't ask him. He surrounded himself with, she was worried. Still, it's how you think we could do that? Even if Fanali's staff can't do that around him, they wouldn't. You can't ask the president that. How could you ask the man that hard question? That's what, something like that. She was saying you can ask the man that question. Reporters can ask anybody anything if they want. He could choose not to answer. It's too hard a question for him. They curate everything. So this is what is the problem. It's this fallacy that he and on policy. I don't even talk about his policies, etc. The man, uncle, his family said he's unfit. His uncles, his whole family said he's unfit. He's a novice and what? He has nothing. Yeah, well, all of that, but he's clueless. He said he doesn't know anything. He doesn't have any competence. I would be a little embarrassed if my family said that about me. I'd be a lot embarrassed if my own blood family said I'm useless. Apnu says it all the time, but at least, Norton is my friend, yes.
Dennis Shabaldam,
So I'm going to, so the recent thing too about, anyhow, let's go on. Let's go to Dennis. Yeah,
yes.
Let me do Dennis,
Mr. Jagdeo, could you say what answers have government received from the police force and the Guyana Revenue Authority about the complicity of their staff, or alleged complicity, in the matters concerning Mr. Mohammed and Ms. Thomas in relation to the OFAC sanctions? And secondly, for your party, what was the value of the Guyana government hired U.S. lobbying firm persuading at least 2 members of the U.S. Congress expressing concern that an OFAC sanctioned man could undermine Guyana's democracy?
So first of all, it is the government that hired the lobbying firm. The lobbying firm has to deal with everything related to Venezuela. They have enormous contacts and access to information in the United States of America. APNU was saying that we're not paying serious attention to the Venezuelan border issue. We don't do enough publicity-wise, and I've had to deal with that matter here. But the United States of America is very important in the defense of our territorial integrity and sovereignty, their support. Venezuela and others, they constantly, through lobbyists, paid or unpaid, or through third parties, try to influence U.S. policymakers in relation to the border matter. They spread, like the APNU dossier falsely, information about the history of the border issue. They tried to make it look like the United States government was historically supportive of them on the border issue, because when the arbitration was held, the U.S. had a strong influence there. We believe that the lobbying firm, because of their connection in the U.S. government and and their presence, this is a major firm to help to fight off Venezuela's threat. They see more than what we have seen. They don't share everything with us, the law firm. They were paid to help us to make sure that Venezuelan policymakers are there. You've had a long-standing issue of Venezuela and bypassing sanctions through the gold smuggling and some of it was coming through Guyana. Smuggling of Venezuelan gold through Guyana. That there were generals in Venezuela who were complicit with individuals here who were the conduit to getting Venezuelan gold in that period, not now, but in the past, who were getting the gold out through it being sold from Guyana, through individuals in Guyana. You do the maths. I'm not going to say it. You do the maths. And that's, so when they speak about things, when a US congressman says anything, a lobbyist can tell them anything, but a lobbyist have info too. A lobbyist can tell you anything like a policymaker, and that's lawful in the US. They file it and it's open. So the reason they did that is they know it's filed publicly, not that APNU discovered this or the Mohammed discovered this or someone else discovered this. It is in public document like FARA. The FARA, they file what they send to the congressmen. And they filed all of this, the suggested tweets. But people know what they are talking about. To think that the US congressmen only listen to lobbyists, they have staff. They get intelligence briefing. They know what they're talking about. And trust me, if they say there's a connection, there has to be a connection. People don't put their career on the line. And so, anything to do with Maduro and the Venezuelan government infringing our sovereignty is fair game. And I didn't know. We don't tell the lobbyists what to do on a daily basis. We don't tell them what to do on a daily basis. There's no one in government who said, go after the Mohammeds. We can do that ourselves here, as we've been doing. We can do that ourselves. But trust me, when Reuters said that again, nobody believed them. But Reuters, they said, oh, it's a lie from Reuters. The sanctions came on the gold smuggling side. What about the two other allegations that Reuters made about cocaine smuggling from Colombia and also laundering money for Russian mafia? Those are being investigated by several US agencies according to Reuters, and Reuters have great credibility. So I wouldn't get all hot under the collar. You read for yourself. You look at it for yourself. And so, but there was nobody from the government who told them to do this. But these people work. Their job is to keep the US government briefed on any threat to us from the Maduro angle or from on the border angle. We would pay 10 lobbyists if necessary to keep our country safe. And anybody who tries to undermine that, and if he's sanctioned and Maduro is sanctioned, we may very well lose the US support on the border issue, because you have a sanctioned man here too. They'd be conflicted as to who to support, because you have two sanctioned individuals. So we don't have any apology for protecting our borders in this country. And as I said to APNU, when they were saying they had to hide the 18 million signing bonus, if they needed $100 million in opposition to ensure that we protect ourselves from Venezuela, they would have gotten my vote and the whole opposition vote in the parliament to appropriate the money. Because we need to keep our country safe. What's the second question? The first question, please. Yes.
It was the first one about
what report? What report we have?
Yes. And as I have the mic, Mr. Jagdeo, can you categorically say whether or not the Guyana government that actually influenced the lobbyists?
I just said that. I said
Yes.
there was nobody from the government of Guyana who told them this. I just said that.
No, I just wanted to get it pretty straight.
So that is one issue. The second issue is what report we've received from the GRA and the police. So this guy whole campaign is about he's a victim. He has nothing to offer the country except giving out a little money, and that money, when he has to pay his taxes, and trust me, he will have to pay the taxes. He may have to collect back money from people who is giving to pay the taxes, because it's not going to go away. After the elections, he'd have to pay his taxes. And I believe that now that he is declared, we should not really, personally, we're the political opponents now. I don't want to be getting report from GRA and the police about him anymore on these matters, because we know what has happened. We've already filed a case, a criminal, for submitting a false invoice. The goal issue will come up later. The police have to act on their own and so forth, not to give us report, me as General Secretary of the PPP or Vice President. I don't need any report on him or from the police or the GRA on this matter now. We deal with it subsequently, but there are lots and lots of things. You saw his fear about the investigation that's taken place. He issued a statement. Nobody said he is a suspect. And for good reason, he's fearful. On the other matter, the killing of paper shorts. So, these are the matters.
Dr. Jagdeo, Cordell Jones from Live Wire News. Ganesh Mahipal has said the PPP could have built 15 hospitals instead of 12 if there was less corruption. I'd like to ask you today, what do you think would have accounted for the AP and UAFC not being able to build one facility of that nature?
Mahipal again. Mahipal is an opportunist and just useless. I don't like wasting my time. We could have built 50 hospitals. You remember in 2015, they were saying the same thing about the PPP, how we were corrupt, and they will have that $35 billion was lost every year to through public procurement. And they quoted Gulsarana saying that they couldn't even find $1 billion lost through public procurement, 35 billion per year. They have not demonstrated, and 10 million lost, but it's a slogan. So ask Mahipal, if they didn't build the facility the biggest things they built was this thing at Durban Park. Well, I call it the thing. So it's $1.6 billion they spent on that, 600 million missing. And somebody said to me they said they built the bridge across the Moruca Bridge. That's their thing, the Moruca Bridge. I think it's US and at Ferguson. Ferguson couldn't even remember which bridge. She said the Macaura Bridge. Macaura Bridge is a different place. In Moruca, the bridge in Moruca. That's the only bridge they talk about. They did practically nothing. They started off again with the public procurement issue. In 5 years under APNU, there's a requirement in law under the Procurement Act that every tender issued through the MPTAP, which is above $15 million, every contract awarded must be placed on a website accessible to all Guyanese. On that website, you have to put the contractor's name, the procurement method, whether it's sole sourcing, restrictive tender, or competitive bidding, and you have to put the contract sum, minimum information. So every citizen in Guyana can then go there and get the information as to who got contracts above 15 million. In the entire 5 years under APNU, zero, nothing was placed up there. So they spent billions of dollars, hundreds of billions of dollars, but not a single bit of information. We don't know who got the contracts, what was the sum, and how they procured. So we got into office. COVID the first year. By September of 2021, we started uploading this information. From September 2021 to now, every contract that has been issued by NPTAB above that level, it's on that site. You can see which contractor got the information, got the contract, what procurement method, and the contract sum. So they can get the information now. That's the difference. So you can shout at the top of your voice. Remember how many forensic audits they did? They got, Gulsaran was called in, given some, because he was hostile to us. Christopher Ram was hostile to us, he got some audit. They didn't go to public tender. And contrary to the law of the country, you can't, the Minister of Finance can't contract an audit. It's either the Public Accounts Committee or the Auditor General. But they defied the law. They gave Christopher Ram some, they gave some to Gulsaran, and then they gave also Charles Sugrim, who is Azruddin campaign manager. He got a contract too, to do forensic audit under the PPP, under their term, to find corruption. They did, I don't know how many, 127 forensic audits. They couldn't charge anybody with theft. And the forensic audits were audits that are done with an intention of laying charges. It's not like a regular audit. They couldn't find information. All this talk about big corruption under the PPP in that period. So they're back at it, Paul, etc. You ask Paul how he hustled the UG money. Paul is the man. You go and check, Google Paul and UG money. Everybody who think, and you would see what happened there. Just Google Paul and UG money when he was there. And so I don't pay too much attention to what Paul is talking. It's the usual thing in the period. Look at the cost of living. They're saying, oh, the PP not doing enough. I've just explained to you all that we've done to keep cost of living down, but they wanted to even reverse the subsidy to GPL and then still talk about, oh, they will control cost of living because Norton will put a cap on the price that you can sell your borer or your squash or okra at the market. He'll decide to put a cap. They will control food, the price of greens. Nonsense. You know, that's what I'm getting at. Pure nonsense. It's election season. Let's go on.
Good afternoon, Khadija, Starbrook News. VP, could you say if the contract with the firm, the Continental Strategy, the lobbying firm, could you say if that contract has been renewed? Contract was supposed to run for 6 months from December 2024.
I don't know, but I hope they have renewed it. I hope that it is renewed. I don't know personally, but I hope that they continue it.
Okay. My second question, according to the contract, the same 2024 contract, the lobbying firm is obligated to submit reports to the country to update them on whatever work they've been doing. Specifically going back to the tweets, could you say what evidence is there to suggest that Azrin Mohammed is a pro-Maduro puppet?
Well, the thing is that, as I said clearly, there was no direction from the government of Guyana to link or to say link Maduro to Azruddin Mohammed. But if our lobbyists, given their vast network in the United States of America can create that link, and if a congressman has now added his name to a tweet, trust me, there is a connection. The connection might be through the illegal export of Venezuelan gold. That's all I'm going to say on the matter.
Marcel Thomas, Tablet News. I'm following up on something you said earlier relating to the Chinese, and they're not paying for goods through the formal banking system. Does government, or has government received information that this is what is happening? And has there, go ahead.
So what we've been examining is an attempt to ensure that all of our resources are going for legitimate purposes. The money in circulation, the foreign currency, that they're being utilized for legitimate purposes. And to ensure further that our foreign currency is being used to support Guyanese demand for goods and services and investment purposes. We examine those who have requested money through the banks, their banks. So the banks know who they're selling money to. And in the request for purchase of resources from the bank, we do not see a number of companies that are doing business here, Trinidadian, Chinese especially, that they're not on that list. So clearly, they're either getting the goods supplied by someone and selling for them, another big person who's importing the goods, who may be on the formal system, or, as we've heard, people are buying up gold and exporting. You know, there were some stings in relation to that, and we caught some individuals, they're charged, a Chinese ring here that was doing this. Or thirdly, they are buying the currency and then utilizing the currency to pay for these goods. That's why, from the currency perspective, that's in the open market, they're buying that at a premium. So all of this is being examined by both GRA and the security services. So we have to examine all of this, not because we're targeting anyone, but because our duty is to ensure that the resources in our financial system in Guyana are being used for legitimate purposes and to support Guyanese growth and Guyanese business, mainly.
My substantive question is on the Linseka and CH split. Member of Parliament David Patterson has raised a number of questions as it relates to the impact of this separation of companies, and has asked government to address them publicly. Will government be doing that? That's one.
Marcel, I saw this story, and I saw you reflected accurately the report that was given to you. And so you would ask me several questions in writing, and I got a report from the people who are managing the project. So they're still sticking with the timeline of mid-next year. These are the people who are in charge of the project from our side, because we've stepped back quite a while now because we're engaged in other issues. That's one. So they're still sticking with that timeline. We've been hearing about the breakup of the consortium, and we're told that this is to facilitate, because they have internal disputes, to facilitate the completion of the project by that deadline. That would allow them to accelerate work, because it seems as though the internal wrangling between the company is affecting the pace of implementation of the project. So I'm told that it's a positive thing that is happening, but the technical people have to examine that. That's the second point. The third point I gave you, and you reflected it here accurately in the Starbuck News story that they gave me and I shared with you, is where they are in terms of piling, how many piles, what stage they are with the equipment, what will go in soon in these places. So they told us all about this. So that is where we are at this stage. So we've shared the information about the civil works that are ongoing, the completion time. You know, we're gone to arbitration on some of the issues, and we believe that the company, their proposal to split, for want of a better word, is to ensure faster movement on the project.
A follow-up to that would be on the loan taken by government from EXIM, US EXIM.
Yeah.
Given that it's this contractor, the consortium that was chosen, how does it impact that loan now that you have one of the partners pulling out?
No, because it still remains US company. So it will not impact the loan. It will not impact the loan. It's to the project. It's to the government. The loan is to the government of Guyana.
Roland Nelson around the region. I'm sorry. Roland Nelson around the region. Dr. Jagdeo, two things. Two questions quickly. Regarding, I have a foot problem. Regarding the initiative that the Ministry of Health had introduced of the dialysis grant, I think it's a very good initiative because many persons are benefiting. However, what we've realized is that the dialysis grant of $600,000 is only lasting many patients 3 months. After then, the doctors and nurses are complaining that the hospital is packed up with many persons who cannot afford to pay their dialysis. Has the government ever thought about pulling the grant, and instead of offering a dialysis grant, maybe make the centers available to offer free dialysis at their public health systems, so that people can get free dialysis instead of having the grant? Because many persons, when they collect the grant, they're forced to use the money for other purposes instead of the dialysis. And with many persons can't afford NIS, it will be cheaper that way.
But it moved from 0 to 600,000. So people get a grant. They were getting 0 before, and they're now getting a grant of 600,000. We can look to increase that grant, but also we should not undertake everyone. I'm sure as with the hospitals improve, we'll be able to improve the facilities across the country to maybe do dialysis. Right now, if you see what's happening at Diamond, the hospital there, tomorrow another one will be open. Then immediately thereafter, 4 others across the country. So that's the quality of facilities we'd have in significant parts of the country. We're now looking at staffing, which is a big issue because the level of services is going up. So we have to ensure that we pace ourselves. In the next term, we are going to complete these hospitals, all 12 of them. 6 would have been open already. We will then expand, upgrade all of the remaining hospitals, like so Bartica and Linden, etc. We're working at strengthening management of the hospital for greater accountability. So we'd have to train people for management. We're training about 5,000 healthcare professionals in the next term and recruiting from abroad. Then we'll focus on preventative medicine more. We'll collaborate with the private sector on on tertiary care. We'd ensure the availability of drugs and other medical supplies at the hospital. And only then can we start looking at improve or expanding the level of services, because we have to get the personnel. Face it now, we have 26 doctors at study, I was told. So we need probably 40 doctors in the region to do the fully operate both study and the new hospital. We have 26 there. At Fort Wellington, we have 5 doctors. Now at Fort Wellington, we need 20-something doctors to open up, to start working in a new facility, which will be open soon, a stone throw away from Fort Wellington. Next month, also the one in Skeldon will be open. The one closing down the Skeldon Hospital, and we only have 5 or 6 doctors there. So you need a lot more personnel, and that's what we're working at recruiting now from abroad. Several people are coming in over the next 2 months from Cuba, from I think Bangladesh, etc., until we can train up our people, because the level of services in these hospitals will grow. So we don't want to take on too much more now. It's better to give people some money where they can go to different places than to take on new levels of services until we get the personnel to run this. And we are realistic about it. We're realistic about it, you know. So we can't manufacture these doctors and nurses overnight. We're going to increase the pay, so more of our people would be there, would want to go into the profession. We'll train more people. But given the revolutionary changes in the sector and the level of services to world-class healthcare, we have a lot more to do in terms of personnel training and other things. So we've mapped out the plan for the next 5 years, what we're going to do in these sectors, in this sector. So including dialysis and a lot more on other types of services, like a lot of tertiary care services.
Okay,
Yeah,
my
thank
second
you.
question,
Right.
Doc, regarding the issue of, I know when you took office in 2020, you were passionate over the NISIL land deal situation. You had made a commitment that those ordinary Guyanese who had bought land from NISIL would have gotten their transport, their land title. It is 5 years now, they've not gotten it. When persons are calling NISIL,
Yeah.
they're saying that they have to check with the finance minister. What is the status now of those
Yeah.
persons who've paid off for their land but still have not received their land from NISIL?
Yeah, but you know, until now we are busy trying to get back their land. A lot of people in like Wales, for example, you have the lands are needed for housing. And a lot of people have opted not to agree to what we have put to them. So in terms of titling, we have issued about 20,000 titles to people in the last 5 years across sectors, in housing particularly, and some of the NISIL deals have been reworked. So people had to give up their lands. We've had some in court now, some are still in court, etc. So we are going to keep at it, but it was a total mess. It was a total mess that APNU left. I was with the sugar workers a few days back, and I was talking to them about NISIL. In fact, last week I mentioned something about NISIL. If anybody want to look at how corruption, we should do a test case of privatization and corruption. Looking at NISIL. NISIL was responsible for disposal of state assets or privatization for several years. In 2012, we put out a report, and our report was tabled in Parliament. Every asset that was disposed of, we showed the procurement, the disposal method, method and which asset was there. I'm going to get you a copy of that. So you'd see accountability for the entire tenure. Entire tenure. I remember when we went in to finance in the early days on the APNU, there were 4 agencies doing privatization. The Public Divestment Secretariat, the Public Corporation Secretariat, there's some divestment secretariat, Public Corporation Secretariat, Office of the President, State Planning. We stopped it all. We created a board. We said NISIL would be responsible, a technical secretariat. You had to go to cabinet. We put 3 members of we put the Consumers Association, the TUC, and also the private sector on the board, and you had to go to cabinet. Transparent process. In all the years we've been in government, up to 2012, we put out the report, it went to Parliament. APNU came in, they said there's corruption at NISIL. And then no report, no audit, and they dispose of all the lands, Jordan is charged for that now. Dispose of the lands without collecting money, past transport, etc. It's a test case of how corrupt APNU was. I keep forgetting these things because we have moved on. But the country needs to record a lot of these issues, or else we wouldn't have the economic history in the correct perspective. And we'd have the same people like Jordan and others, and Patterson come back and talk, and Mahipal talk about corruption. Some of the people who were the worst offenders will come back and talk about it. Thank you.
Jarabrine NCN. With more and more vehicles entering the country and mention of plans to build a flyover along the Heroes Highway, is the government looking at building more flyovers in other parts of the country? And my second question, you mentioned earlier the opposition politicians and so on, the crossovers that your party has previously welcomed, and there were more resignations recently. So is the PPP open to welcoming these opposition politicians, and is it possibly in talks with some of them right now?
No, not in talks, but if people subscribe to our philosophy, which is a multi-ethnic party working for all of Guyana, if they see our plans and want to be part of their vision and the plans of the PPP, they're welcome in our party and in our family. Not necessarily, they don't have to be party members. We welcome people. We take them at face value. So that's where we are at this stage. So we keep that open mind about this issue. And a lot of people are, from what I'm told, they go to a lot of the party members. You've seen more people come to us at the national level, but this is happening every day in the regions. Like in Linden, I met a group, a party group, and they built their party campaign office on their own. They want their own campaign office. They're very excited about Wisma. And there are about 15 people there who are new, who said to me, you know, we join up the unit there. Those people don't get mentioned, but they are campaigning now on the ground. And there are thousands across the country who are joining the campaign. They don't need to get their names in the newspapers. They just want, they're happy with what they're see happening in their communities, and they're joining our campaign. So I want to thank those people and pay tribute to them too, because many of them are working the ground very hard. They're people of every race, and they're coming to us in large numbers. And I want to welcome them too, because sometimes it seems it's just a few of the higher profile people we talk about all the time, who've been part of the national politics. What's the flyover? Yes. The answer, wherever we have traffic studies going on all the time. We're looking, this is an ongoing task, constantly engaging as to how we will manage traffic, you know. So if some public infrastructure is required to alleviate the problem there, we will look at it, including the overpass and stuff like that, building those.
Good afternoon, Trina Williams, Ghana Chronicle. I know that you spent a good portion of your press conference talking about the major achievements under this government since assuming office in 2020, but what fate do you think the local economy would have had if APNU AFC government was still in power, especially given the global shocks from COVID-19 and different conflicts around the world?
You're asking me to predict how incompetent the APNU would have been in government. And it's easy to predict because we have so much evidence of it. So they, in the middle of COVID, right, or when they took over a hospital, they started spending a lot of money on building out the hospital. Country shut down. No oxygen in the hospital, no beds in the hospital, nothing practically. No, we could have done what, 40 tests per day when you needed like thousands. We managed to get it up to 5,000 quickly. We got into office within a month. We worked in the middle of COVID. I remember us meeting, President Ali and I, meeting with the medical professionals at the conference center. Everybody in mass, because we just took office. We're thinking, how do we plan for this pandemic? And we said, we have to get all of these things up. We went, a man tried to dupe us on the beds that we were buying by saying he made a wrong thing on the invoice. I can remember the story like yesterday. And we just had to buy the beds that were available, got the oxygen, just run pipes in the wall. A section of it was in mold to get people a place to put people. And then getting the vaccines and everything else. So imagine you have to address a pandemic. People's lives are at stake, and this is all they were doing, building some corrupt thing to build a hospital and get a little hustle on the contract award. We would have had a disaster with APNU in power. You remember then they were saying, oh, we shouldn't buy the vaccine, the Russian vaccine is bad. Everybody around the world trying to get vaccines, and they were examining the efficacy of which vaccine was best, would be best suitable for Ghana. You couldn't get any vaccine globally. That was the position they took in that period, that crucial period. Just imagine that. That's the level of incompetence that you had. The productive sectors had already started falling apart. Mining, because of the taxes. Forestry, the output shrunk by 50% because they would have continued the policy where they were charging capital on machinery and equipment. If you were, farming would have been killed because they put a tax on fertilizer, pesticide, land rental charges, water charges. Those, agriculture is often a marginal activity. If you layer it up with all of these costs, nothing would have happened. Look at what we did. We removed all of those. We started investing back in the D&I, in farm-to-market roads that they had practically cut down from the budget. We started helping farmers with better seeds and a whole range, some free fertilizer. They started getting back the productive sector up. The last crop, the biggest crop ever in the history of the country. That sort of thing. It was an engagement. Think about APNU and the hotels. You probably wouldn't have had a single hotel built because the day we got into, or a week after we got in, we were planning that already. We put out a tender, we worked with them, we created the incentive regime, met everyone and said, can we help with the land? I remember the hotel at the airport. The proposal was, because the company that's building it, Basu, they own the hotel, they wanted to put it on the existing they have a restaurant there. And we said, but this will affect our expansion. And it's a tiny piece of land. And I said, if you're building an international, I was saying, and the president were saying, if you're building an international hotel, and it has to be real international, it's better to go out of the central area in the airport and do it at the side there and get more space. Or else it would have been choked up there and gone very high. And we worked with the people, got them the piece of land there, and now we have a 30, I don't know, probably about 30 million US investment owned by a Guyanese. And now we have an international airport, an international hotel right next to our airport. Families come in from abroad. If you have a flight delay, people can be placed there. The flight attendants and others, they may not want to come down to Georgetown, drive down there. It is that kind of engaged involvement and leadership that President Ali has brought to the table. So they were aloof. They were not even, people were suggesting good things to them. You ask maybe a Floyd Haynes about the good ideas he had to them. Floyd got a license under us that you probably would have never gotten under APNU and set up a merchant bank. Now that is Guyanese owned and also assisting hundreds of people to raise financing. It's a very, very different atmosphere. And so I shudder to think about their incompetence. What would have happened? You definitely wouldn't have had the hospitals, and Patterson would still be trying to do feasibility studies. Remember that he made he's charged for now, before the code, the same feasibility study across the Demerara River that was done illegally. He would be busy doing that and conceptualizing projects that we had conceptualized 20 years ago. Thank you. Oh,
question.
One more question. Okay.
What do you anticipate from APNU's campaign launch Sunday, especially given the mass exodus and, as you mentioned earlier, the lack of coherent policy positions?
More rhetoric, more nonsense, and a healthy dose of racism. Thank you.